He asked for forgiveness from God, from his people, from history. Then he rose and said to his officers, "The city is God's to give or to take. I have done my part." That night he donned armor of silver and crimson, rode to the gates, and waited for dawn. Before sunrise, the Ottoman cannons opened fire. The walls cracked, the defenders broke. Mehmed's troops poured through the breaches, and the city screamed. Constantine fought in the chaos, sword in hand, his imperial crest torn from his armor. He disappeared in the crush of battle. No one ever found his body. The last Roman emperor died unnamed, buried beneath the dust of his own capital, and by that, he achieved what none of his ancestors could. He became myth. When the sun rose, the cross of Hagia Sophia had fallen, and the crescent rose in its place. The 1,000-year empire of Rome was gone, not defeated by weakness, but by time. Sultan Mehmed entered the city, looked upon the ruins, and whispered, "What a city we have given to ruin." Even the conqueror felt the weight of what he had destroyed. Constantinople became Istanbul. The world shifted from medieval to modern in a single day. Centuries later, legends grew that Constantine had not died, but slept beneath the city, waiting for the marble to bleed and the empire to rise again, that his statue still walks at night by the old walls. For Greeks, he became a ghost king, a reminder that dignity can outlive kingdoms. For the West, he became a symbol of doomed faith, a man who faced extinction without despair. He lost everything, and yet in losing, he preserved what mattered most, the idea of Rome. The story of Constantine isn't just about war, it's about how civilizations die, not in one blow, but in silence, compromise, and forgetting. It's about the moment when people stop believing in what they inherited and start selling it for safety. By the time the Ottomans broke the walls, Byzantium had already fallen, in its heart, long before its stones. But Constantine did what no wall could do. He stood, and by standing, he gave the fall meaning. We live in a world that feels sometimes like late Byzantium, brilliant, connected, tired. We build, we trade, we argue about faith and art, while the cannons of change already thunder outside our walls. Constantine's story is not about a lost empire. It's about us. It's a mirror asking, when our walls tremble, will we run, or will we stay and defend what we believe, even if the world calls it hopeless? He died without crown, without tomb, without name, but history gave him all three back. Because in the end, Constantine XI didn't lose a city. He preserved a symbol, the idea that honor is not about victory, but about how you face defeat. When the empire fell, he stayed where he was needed, on the wall, at the edge of the world, watching the sun rise for the last time over a civilization that once called itself eternal. And maybe that's why, centuries later, his name still burns quietly, like the final candle of Rome refusing to go out. He didn't lose a kingdom, he buried a civilization. The morning of May 29th, 1453, the sky over Constantinople is gray, the sea is still, and on the walls of the ancient city stands a man who already knows how this day will end. His name is Constantine Palaiologos, the last emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, the last emperor of a dream 1,000 years old. By sunset, his empire will be gone. By dawn, his name will become legend. He was born into ruins that still remembered glory. For 1,000 years, Constantinople had called itself the New Rome, the fortress of Christendom, the bridge between East and West, the city that could not fall. But by the time Constantine was born, the marble had cracked, the gold had faded, and the empire had become a memory pretending to be a nation. The West saw Byzantium as old and fragile. The East saw it as tempting and weak. And between them, a single man, born too late to save anything but his own dignity. Constantine was not born to rule. He was one of many brothers, raised in a court more divided than united. But he had something the others lacked, a quiet sense of duty. He studied strategy, theology, and engineering, not for conquest, but for endurance. When civil wars and intrigue tore his family apart, he stayed loyal to the idea of Byzantium, not as a throne, but as a promise. In 1449, after the death of his brother, he became emperor, a crown without gold, a throne without power. The empire he inherited was a map of memories, a few cities, a few islands, and a city that refused to die. Constantine didn't rule an empire, he defended a ghost, Across the Bosporus, a new empire was rising. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, only 21 years old, was everything Constantine feared and secretly admired, ambitious, brilliant, and utterly without mercy. Mehmed wanted what every conqueror before him had failed to take, Constantinople, the jewel of the world. To him, it wasn't just a city, it was destiny. In April 1453, the Ottoman army appeared before the walls, over 100,000 men, hundreds of cannons, and a siege gun so massive that it shook the earth when it fired. Inside the city, barely 7,000 defenders, Greeks, Phoenicians, monks, merchants, and a few mercenaries, outnumbered 15 to 1. But on the walls, Constantine stood among them, not as emperor, but as soldier. Constantinople was a paradox, a holy city filled with doubt, a fortress of faith with too few believers. The people prayed for miracles. Constantine prayed for clarity. He knew there would be no divine intervention, only courage, steel, and time. He walked the walls daily, speaking to soldiers by name. He refused to hide in palaces. He worked with engineers to repair cracks and fought beside commoners when stones rained from the sky. When priests begged him to flee to the west, he answered quietly, "I cannot live as an emperor without an empire." The siege lasted 53 days. The cannons never stopped. Each dawn, the city trembled as if the world itself were breaking. The Ottomans filled the moats with bodies and faith. The defenders answered with silence and prayer. Constantine fought exhaustion with discipline. He ordered rationing, organized shifts, repaired walls at night by torchlight. He sent desperate letters to Europe, but no help came. Rome debated, Venice hesitated. The world watched Byzantium die, like a candle flickering in another room. On the evening of May 28th, the city was quiet. The sky glowed faintly red. Some said from sunset, others from omen. In Hagia Sophia, priests held one final service. Greeks and Latins, who had argued for centuries over doctrine, stood side by side, weeping. Constantine entered the church, removed his crown, and fell to his knees.